Hello, my name is Tsubasa. I am from Japan.
I am Morgan Mullen, and I am from Weymouth, Nova Scotia.
Well, let's just dive into our podcast. So, since I'm from Japan, I grew up in Tokyo. I went through grade 1 to grade 9, so that's 9 years of education in public school system. My experience there was that I felt like I was a prisoner. Like I was held into this segregated room, and you had to go through 6 periods like every day from Monday to Friday, sometimes Saturday, and the workload was ridiculous. It was not something that you will ever see in Canada. So, you want to talk about it for now?
Yeah, and I spent from grade primary to grade 9 in Canada, Weymouth actually, and going to public school. And then after that, interestingly enough, I went from grade 8 to 12 in the United States prep school. So my father made a conscious choice against mine to actually bring me back a grade. That was because of hockey. The reason I went there was because of hockey, and he wanted me to play 2 years at that school. So it worked out for that, but academically it also worked out for me because the workload there was substantial. Over 3 hours of work a night. You're given a 2-hour study hall to do it. And so the difference was massive. I wasn't able to cope right away, so I was put into like the lower section of learning, like of 3 sections, 3 being the worst. I was in 3, but there is a huge support system, and you can gradually work your way up. But yeah, spent grades 8 through 12 in prep school, and we're going to talk in our next segment about some similarities we had between our 2 experiences and
the differences. We're gonna compare our experiences. So let's just talk about start off with the clothing, I guess. Like in Japan, like public school, you have to wear a uniform from grade 7 up until grade 12. But in private school, for some other cases, they can wear casual dresses, and some students choose to go through entrance exam process and interviews just so that they can wear casual clothes throughout their education.
Yeah, and funnily enough, it's the opposite for us here, whereas I wore coat and tie from breakfast until lunch or supper at night.
Interesting.
Mandatory, even on Saturday, I had to wear a coat and tie until noon. So it's funny that our public school route, you would take the casual approach to your dress, the opposite in Japan, and the more professional route through prep school.
Wow, interesting. So let's just talk about the school rules that we had. So for my school, rule was quite strict. You couldn't bring any electronics, no food or drinks, no entertainment, so like card games up until anything that is not necessary for school, you couldn't bring. There's also cleaning duties that you had to do after school. So after school, like classes end, you had to stay after school, and with it, like in your homeroom, you have to clean, and that is rotated by group within that homeroom. And how about the rules that you had?
It's awesome you explaining the public school system to me, because it sounds very similar to the private school system I went through, because I also had duties as well to clean my room. My bed had to be made before I went to breakfast. If it wasn't, I had penalties.
Wow.
And my room had to be clean. And for your electronics thing, I had we weren't allowed to watch movies, have a phone, or play video games or anything like that, unless it was on Sunday. At which point we were allowed to ask our dorm parent, because I was a boarding student.
Right.
I was allowed to ask him for my phone or video games for one day of entertainment, right? So it's very, very strict. But then when I went to the high school setting, you were allowed to have all that stuff.
Interesting.
More responsibility.
Because some cases, some student brought phones, but student will compensate until the school ended that day. Unless there's an emergency, nobody were allowed to bring phones. I would talk about semester system. Like my school experience, where at least in Japan, there's 3 semesters. The new semester started from April, and first semester it goes through April to July, second semester go through September to December, and third semester is from January to March. Each semester has midterm and finals. We're expected to write 5 midterms and 9 finals per semester, so total 14 exams per semester.
Yeah, I had a similar thing for prep school, 3 semesters. One thing I very much enjoyed about the 3-semester thing in prep school is you're expected, it's mandatory, required to play a sport. And so you get the opportunity to play 3 different sports if you'd like to. For me, hockey was a sport I was there for, and so winter was blocked up for me. But in summer or in fall and in spring, I was able to try baseball and soccer. I had done them before, but I get to just mess around and have fun with doing that, right? And so I think that's a great opportunity that prep schools give people. I mean, it's forced participation, right? Like, who wants to be forced to participate? But generally, the people that are there want to.
Right. Since we have next to no time, let's just talk about last and final things: students' relations and student-teacher relations. For culturally, students have to show respect to the teachers or elderly by using certain language, like yes sir, no sir. There is no question. It's an unspoken rule that everybody knows. Also, between students, there's a seniorities, so like you have to listen to and obey what like higher grade students says. And for example, if you don't obey that, I got beaten by my by senior students just because I didn't speak in the way that they liked to be spoken to.
Yeah, it's really interesting. At my private school, I had a South Korean friend who was in that position of the guy that beat you up, and so I saw that other aspect. Yeah, I saw the other aspect of that, and it's interesting the way that culture is just like that's the way it is, And so talking about whether these schools are equitable and how diverse they are. Like you would say that private school is not an equitable place, and I would agree. A lot of people cannot possibly have the opportunity to go to a private school, but it was definitely the most diverse place I've ever learned in. I had friends from South Korea, Mexico, Spain, France, England, Germany. I mean, the list goes on. The amount of people from around the world that I met and talked with, it's very beneficial, to be educated in such a diverse community. I just wish our public schools could have that sort of opportunity, but it's tough.
Right.
You can't bring people in all around the world.
For Japan, it was equitable in terms of accessibility. It's free education. Everybody's welcome. There was no special ed class, so like no matter what disability or like difficulties that you have, you will be placed in a normal classroom. It might be offend some of you saying normal class, but like deal with it. But because of the culture of seniorities and like respecting the elders, it was not equitable for most of the people, especially for newcomers, because they'll get beaten like I got, or like you just simply don't want to obey somebody that you don't even respect.
Just to wrap things up, we just wanted to talk about our experiences. They were different but similar at the same time, and how they relate to diverse learning.
Yeah, so like at least from my experience, the classes with the teaching style one size fits all, and also we are known for bullet train, and the speed that they go through the curriculum is very fast. Like since I only completed up until grade 9, but in terms of math and science, like I knew most of the stuff that I learned in grade 12 high school level in Canada.
Yeah, and I think we talked earlier amongst just me and you about the support systems that we would have got. You hardly had a support system.
Yeah, none.
And for me, in prep school, the expectations were extremely high, but you had more support than you needed, and so you had no excuse. And I really like the idea of high expectations, and I think that's something that we should be adding into public school from the prep school perspective. But if we do that, we have to add the support along with it.
Exactly. If we expect high, we need the support so that they can go through with it. Having high expectations is great. I feel like that's something that we're lacking in our current education system.
Agreed.
Maybe because there's not enough support for teacher and students to achieve such high expectations. But we're well over the time limit, so we're gonna end this conversation here. But I'm hoping to hear some feedbacks and
Thank you for listening.
And let us know in the comment.